So we are doing with the ASA Fire overview, and also we are going to study your ASA firewall initialization stuff. That's the topic for today. So what we do is right now we go to our lab topology. So what we have here, I've taken one ASA that is connected to outside. We have got a couple of interface facing DMZ, one interface facing your inside, and you can see the bold ones, the much security level that I've kept. So I've got here, a couple of DMZ and one outside, one inside. So 100 for the inside, 0 for the outside, 50 for the DMZ. Everywhere I'm using the private networks for DMZ and the inside, but only on the outside interface I'm using a public network. And these are the outside networks that I want to reach. Say 10.2, 199, 200, 10.4. Some resources on the DMZ, 10.3. Likewise on inside, I have got some corp resources of 10.20 and 10.1s. All right. So what you do is, you set up the same topology like this, okay? Whether you work with packet tracer for ASA or whether you work with GNS3 or EVE-NG. Initially, what I do is I will show this from the scratch. How do I configure it, so you can have a good idea. Generally, on the iOS router, iOS is a good command line console 0, logging synchronous, executable timeout 00, no IP domain lookup. Right? These are the basic best practices commands that you normally type. So I'm going to R1 and configuring the respective IPs. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm configuring here a couple of loopbacks. So first loopback is 10.1.1.1 as per my topology is considered. The second loopback is say 10.10.10.1, and I have got an interface say 0/1 that is having an IP address of 10.20.20.1. All right, and also E0/0. This interface is going towards a firewall that is 10.11.11.1, and hostname say it is R1. Done with this, let's go to R2, which is the outside router. We'll have 3 loopbacks. First loopback is configured as 10.2.2.1. The second loopback is 199.1.1.1. The third loopback, it is 200.1.1.1. And the interface, which is E00 of the router, I'm treating this as an internet or ISP router for me. This is having 192.1.20.2 as the public IP. That's it. Going back to R3, it needs a couple of IPs, one in the loopback and one in the interface. All right, and on E00, 192.168.3.3. That's all. Last router here is R4. There's a couple of IPs, one in the loopback as 10.444. The E00 interface, this is going to 192.168.4.4. Right, that's all. And now what we do is on the ASA, so my all the routers behind the ASA, surrounding the ASA is configured with the respective IPs. Now on the ASA, first thing first, So when you go to the ASA, once the ASA is initialized, same stuff, enable, and by default, it prompts you password, but it does not have any password there by default. So just say enter without any password. So now once you go to the privilege mode of the ASA, if you type the command show, so normally you have the habit of typing show IP interface brief to check the interface status and the interface IP address is configured, right? But in case of ASA, the command is a little different. It does not show IP interface brief, it is show interface IP brief. Okay, show interface IP brief. And then you can see how many interface right now this firewall is having. So you can see that we have got one management interface, and we are keeping the rest of them as a gigabit Ethernet interface, right? So they support all 1 gig ports. So I've got 6 ports over here. And if you see show version, we are talking about 9.5 here. All right, and if you talk about the services that is connected and the features, you can see which all the features are enabled and which all services are there by default. Then show version command itself. So now when you go to the global config mode, there's a very interesting fact is you can use the show command from here as well. But on the routers, generally, you will be using a keyword called as do before the show commands, right? So like do show something. So here you can execute the show commands directly. So show interface IP brief from the global config mode, it gives you the same output. Likewise, show route will show the routing table. As of now, there is no route that is configured here. Okay. So most of the commands, you will see that the IP keyword is not required with ASA. For example, show IP route was a command that we type on the routers, right? But in case of ASA, this command is not required with IP keyword. So normally if you type show route, that's enough. Okay, because ASA supports only IP as addressing protocol. It does not support IPX, FLTalk. There is a reason, the IP keyword is gone. So they don't use IP keyword for any or most of the commands. All right. So now if, for example, if you see show run interface, there is a good command, show run interface. You can see that these interfaces are having what configuration right now. So by default, it's a blank ASA, and with a blank configuration on the ports, nothing is configured. And if you want to configure something, you have to go to the interface level. So let me look into my topology and let's see, what I have here. So I have to go to interface G00, right? So interface G00. I have to give no shut, activate the port, give an IP address, which is 10.11.11.10. So on ASA, on all the interface, I'm keeping the host IP as .10. Okay. And since it is classless IP, so I have to give the subnet mask. And along with that, I have to give, the nameif command. So nameif, I want to keep this as inside. So it is not case sensitive. If the characters are inside with INSIDE, I told you that automatically the ASA will put, a security level called as 100. So you can see that the security level is set to 100 by default. Okay. So if I wanted that this interface should have a security level of 100, that means it is not required that I go with this command. So security level, I told you the range is from 0 to 100. So it is not required here that I give this value, because by default it is taken as 100. Okay, if I want, I can do that, but it is not required over here. Okay, so that's it. Similarly, going back to the other ports, which is say G01, it is going to your DMZ, say 4 and 3 respectively. I've named it. So G01, no shut. The IP ad is 192.168.4.10. And since it's a classful IP, I want to keep the mask as this. So this will become a classful. And if I give a classful IP address, which will have the default mask, for that, it's not required that I give the mask. Okay, I can just type the IP address and hit enter. And here, nameif is your DMZ4 as per the topology. And I told you any name you give apart from inside, security level will be 0 by default. So what we do is you keep a command called as security level and you give a value. Say I want to keep the value as 50, so I give 50 over here. Coming back to the other ports, so G0/3, no shut. This IP address is 192.168, 3.10. Again, it's classful, so just hit enter. Nameif, so it is DMZ-3. Security level is 0 by default, we know that, but I want to keep it as 50, so I'm keeping this as 50. And last but not the least, interface G02, that is going towards your outside. should have generally a public IP. So I'm giving 192.1.20.10. Again, classful. So I'm hitting without mask, and name if is outside. Security level is 0 by default. No need to configure security level separately with a command because I want it to be 0. So now you've configured all the 4 interface of your ASA. If you just see, show run interface, okay, and see the configuration, you can see directly from here. So for example, you can check on which particular interface, what is the name if given, what is the security level, and what is the IP address with the mask. Though you have not configured the mask for those ports, thinking they are classful, but on the running configuration, you will see the mask, the default mask will appear for the ports. All right. And if you see show interface IP brief now, you can see that the port status and what is the IP address configured on the respective ports. And if you see show route, you can see the routing table that lists you all the connected routes. So 1011, as I've told you, that will not list the port number, but rather it will list the name of the interface. So you will see the keywords as C and L. So L is basically the host route, so or local route. I mean, it will tell you what is IP address configured for that network locally on the port in the routing table as well. All right, so we have got 4 networks over here. So 1011, 192.120 going outside, 3.0 for DMZ3 and 4.0 for DMZ4 respectively. Good so far?